I'm always saying you can't delegate chaos, and I think we've all talked to those people who just wanna, like, throw bodies at the problem, like, "Oh, we're overwhelmed, let's hire," and it's like, if you just keep doing that without ever addressing your systems, like, you're never gonna feel relief. People come to automation or AI or systems work thinking, "I'm gonna do a project and it's gonna be done," and what you are doing is you're actually fundamentally changing the way you work so that people and software can work together, and that requires an identity shift and a habit shift that is a long-term project. And so the repeat part is, okay, now we have to change our culture to be we are a culture of an organization that documents our systems.
Welcome to the show, Kronda. I am so happy to have you on. You and I have been friends for quite some time. And so it's really great to be able to have you on to just talk about tech and the things that we do.
Yes, I'm so excited, and it's really a full circle moment, right? Because you're responsible for my podcast's existing, and, so yeah, I'm really excited.
And look at us. We even kind of matched today,
I
like
know, with
very
no
unintentional
memo. It's just
with no memo. We just came on with the right
just
vibes.
feeling purple, yeah.
Yeah, this feeling purple. I love it. I'm so glad to have you on today because we do work within the same space. We talk about technology and systems with people, and we make sure that they are leveraging these tools in the right way and really thinking thoughtfully about what they're building behind the scenes to be able to do the great work that they do. So I'd love for folks to get to know you a little bit, and no better way to introduce you than to have you introduce yourself. So tell us about your show that you just mentioned and kind of some of the work that you do.
Yeah, so my company is Karvel Digital. I started in 2013 making $500 websites, like, rite of passage. I have transitioned into so many things over the last 13 years. I did websites for 5 years. I've done content marketing coaching. I've been an automation service provider. That's kinda like my most recent thing. And then since finding this amazing mapping tool that I'll talk about later, I've transitioned fully into just really focusing on system strategy and process mapping for mission driven orgs and nonprofits, small teams of like 5 to 30 people. And my podcast is called Begin As You Mean to Go On. That is a mentality that has just been a through line no matter what it is I'm doing. I'm always trying to set the best foundation that I possibly can for my clients. I'm really proud that, even if you go back 10 years to some of my website clients, they're still using their website. They still feel empowered to be able to change it as their business changes. They're not stuck with something so custom that they're like afraid to touch it. So I just always take that approach in whatever it is I'm doing, and I think my offers have just been trying to move closer and closer to the foundation, and now I'm basically like the architect. I'm like, "Oh, you wanna do a thing? Let's map that out first."
Yeah, so true, right? And you and I have like similar journeys in that, like, we started in this kind of like web development, front end development world, and then slowly both of us started to move into kind of infrastructure. Like, what does it mean to actually help these businesses and organizations actually run better and do the work that they do better? And there's this whole layer of infrastructure that exists that often gets overlooked, I think.
Mm,
And why I think you and I both thought this would be a great conversation for us to have for people to really understand
mm,
that more and see the value that not only, just focusing on the front end, what people see, the communications, the visuals, all of that, but really understanding the value of like spending time on the infrastructure part of the work that they do. And so you mentioned you have a podcast. We're actually going to do this fun, dual exchange thing where we're going to run this podcast on on your show. We're running it over here on Ops and Outcomes. So I'll just share a little bit for your guests that like Rhonda, like your wonderful host, I also focus on systems, getting people really set up and using technology in the right way so that they can do the great work that they do. And that sometimes for me actually looks like both looking at the infrastructure layer, but then also looking at the communications layer. And so we help people with their podcasts, any video editing, any app or web development that they like to do. We also really support them in sharing their mission as well. So it can be one of those two sort of sides. It could be the infrastructure or the communications. But with that, what do you want to talk about first?
Whoa. So Um, I I wanna point out for my listeners that, like, one of the reasons we're together is that you have all of this years of experience specifically in the nonprofit space, and I'm just like a little baby interloper going, "I think this would be good for nonprofits." Like, I really and I somebody I had a networking call with a white guy, and he said, "What does mission driven mean?" And I was like, "Well, it's basically code for you're not an
Mhm.
asshole and you can take direction from Black women." I just and that's, we already know, like, people can't take direction from Black women. Look at any election in the last. So that was one of my motivations is like, I have to care about what it is that you're doing because what I do is going to amplify and help you, with your mission. And so I want to make sure that I'm supporting missions that I believe in. So that was kind of the motivation, but I'm completely new to this space. I've worked with like a few nonprofits, but I don't know the ins and outs and the mentalities and the structures. And so that's one of the reasons I think this is gonna be such a valuable conversation is because I'm coming to it from the systems
Yeah.
angle, but you have all this wealth of nonprofit. And so I think for people who are listening to this, there's whether it's for profit or nonprofit, I think there are certain mentalities and assumptions that keep people from engaging with this work. And so our hope is that you're going to listen to this conversation and realize there is a solution actually for the overwhelm that you're feeling and the general sense of chaos that might be going, on with your systems right now. And there are some mindsets that might be keeping you from even getting started. And so we want to kind of talk about those and address those out in the open.
I love that, and it's so great to sort of talk about, like, what is when we think about mission-driven work and, like, what does that actually mean? And, often, I think now the new buzzword is, like, impact work, right? Like, what is that? And it definitely is, like, for someone who doesn't work within a nonprofit space, it can feel so vague, like, what is that exactly? And, yeah, I definitely, I've been in this space for a really long time, and for me, it's also been, like, something that is just driven from within. And that can sometimes also be hard to articulate, like why do this work? And what I realized for myself, at least when I got into technology, is like these technology skills could be used anywhere. Anybody needs them. But I found that I only felt comfortable using them if I knew that the work was going to make the world a better place. And that is very sort of heart driven and also very vague. But that is, I think, what drives a lot of people within this space is that it has to be something that I feel like is going to right a wrong, is going to fix something that's broken, it's going to support and change people's lives. It's a variety of different things, but it's something that's internally driven. And so that's really what, like, when you hear impact work, when you hear mission driven work, it's that, and so it tends to manifest in the form of either, nonprofit work or in maybe, a new term that is used a lot is social enterprise, right? So, intentionally having a mission behind a profit generating mechanism. And so, yeah, I built my career on supporting those with technology, and it's really important. But you're right, there are some mentalities that exist in that space that can sometimes hold them back or make things harder than they need to be.
Exactly, and being a systems person and having been sort of a tech systems person for, my whole career, at least this phase of it, I think one of the things that I get tripped on is to me, it feels so obvious. It's like, well, of course systems are going to help you and like why wouldn't you? And so I'd love to know from your perspective, what are some of the common issues that nonprofits are like foundational issues that they're struggling with? And like what I think we we have ideas about what the solution is, but what are those problems and what keeps them from actually engaging with systems work?
I love that place to begin because, so my podcast is called Ops and Outcomes. And so I picked that name because the systems element of it is the operations part. But there also needs to always be this outcome that comes of it. And that's that mission driven piece, that's that impact piece. And so I feel like the two, very go hand in hand, right? Like you can't have impact, you can't have outcomes in the world without the operations and the systems and the technology to support it. And so I really wanted to really highlight that for organizations because they often see it as two separate things. So in their minds, if I'm creating impact, if I'm out there and I have the outcome that I've been searching for, if it's working, if we're changing those lives, then if the operations is messy and tough for the people doing the work, like we're willing to sacrifice. And that unfortunately is a pattern that is happening within the nonprofit space is that you see three things. You see burnout, you see the loss of institutional knowledge, right? Like they're constantly recreating the wheel every single time. And then there's lots of turnover that happens because of that burnout and because of the work. And so that's where I think you and I can really support people and help them overcome those things.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between not understanding that there's a solution to your problem and just willfully sort of being
Ignoring
okay
it?
with like, "Oh, we'll just burn out our staff and turn them over." Like, if that's you, if you're just like, "Ah, we'll just keep running through the people," like, you can just turn off this podcast and and go on to the
Yes.
next one, right? But
Right.
there's a section of people who understand that that's what's happening, but they're just too overwhelmed and sort of on the treadmill to even think about, is there a solution? And we're here to tell you, like, yes, there is. And also, I think, a lot of for-profit businesses talk about, like, their constituents, right? You have your direct clients that you serve, but you also have your employees or your volunteers or and if you're so focused on, "Oh, we gotta get these outcomes for, the people that we're serving," but then you're treating your staff like shit, like, that's not ethical, it's not an integrity, and creating good experiences for your staff is going to positively affect your mission, is going to positively affect your bottom line because you're not going to have that turnover as much. Like all of those things are interconnected. And I think the people who understand that and just don't know, like, I don't know what to do about this, like that's who we're here for. We're gonna share
Absolutely.
with you what you do about it and how you can get started and why some of the things you're thinking may be barriers probably aren't.
Absolutely. There's so many things that I think hold us back on the nonprofit side from actually going into doing this work, and I get it. Like, I really wanna say, like, I understand it because I can see everyone doing the work and how hard and passionately they work to make this change in the world, and so I just wanna sort of, like, acknowledge that, like, I get why you sort of make the sacrifice of, like, "It's okay if I have to work hard. It's okay if I have to figure this out so that this goes out pristinely and goes out so well, or that I'm able to do whatever it is, deliver that program, raise that money, have that gala, whatever it is." I get that that gets priority and that you're willing to make the sacrifice because you believe in this work so much. And there is a better way. I truly believe that we can make the work behind the scenes more enjoyable and in the long run, that's gonna make more of a difference. Like, we'll be able to scale in so many new ways. And so, yeah, I just want to sort of share that with my nonprofit folks. It's like, I get it. I get that you sacrifice, but you don't have to. You don't have to sacrifice yourself.
I just had this thought that I feel like, and this is just complete conjecture on my part, but I feel like the nonprofit space is very sort of women driven a lot of the time. And so I wonder if there's a level of like the patriarchy where we're socialized to just like fall on our swords and do the thing no matter what versus saying, "Oh, let me see how I can, make this more efficient and more enjoyable and more." I think there is some
Yes,
level of that present where,
definitely.
maybe a for-profit corporation, some dude would just be like, "Oh yeah, make this more like it's sort of the lazy entrepreneur attitude where they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to use AI or I'm just going to use automation or whatever." So, I
Right.
just had that thought and wanted to wanted to voice it.
No, I think you're onto
Um,
something there. I mean, I would say, like, within the organizations that I work with, they do tend to be more women that are at the higher levels or doing the work. Yeah, well, there needs to be a study done specifically on nonprofits about that, and I am sure that we would get the outcome of like, "Yep, that's it. All the gender stuff fits right in."
yeah. So before we move into talking about like actual systems work, I want to double click on the what keeps people from starting. And I just had a conversation yesterday It was a networking conversation with a guy, but he was, like, trying to solve this problem involving his CRM and, like, keeping things up to date, and he was trying to architect, like, this whole solution, and I'm like, "Well, have you considered just asking people to update their info?" Like, sending an email, and he's like, "Yeah, we did that, we didn't get a lot of responses," and I was like, "Well, have you considered just putting that link in the footer of every email?" And just with a little blurb that's like, "Hey, we wanna create the best experience for you, so click here if you have updated it." It was like, he's trying to architect this big thing, and it's like, "Have you considered 1% improvement?" You know?
Yes.
And I think that applies. I think this is sort of across the board, right? For profit, nonprofit. I have experienced so many people who feel like, "Oh, I'm already underwater, I'm already overwhelmed, and now to fix it, I'm gonna have to do more work in order to make it better," and they just cannot stomach it. And so I'll say what I do on my end to kind of combat this, because my offer is really focused on mapping and making it visible, like what is going on now. And so the way that I've come up with to do that is I'm like, just give me your logins. Just give me your logins to your website, your CRM, your form software. It's a half hour to get through like the two-factor auth of it all. And then I will spend time rooting around in your systems because that's going to tell me what's actually happening versus what is in your head or your dusty SOP. Like, just let me read around in there, and then I will come back and I'll show you visibly in a map, "This is what I found," and then we can talk about it, and I think that takes that heavy lift off of them to be like, "Okay, alright, I can spend a half hour giving you my logins and then go back to my grind, knowing we are starting the process to make it better." What do you do on your end to kinda mitigate
Yes.
that?
It's so true, right? Like, the first response you always hear is like, "We don't have time for that." Like, "We got this XYZ happening, like, we don't have time to, like, sit down and talk and have this huge meeting where everybody has to be involved to see who touches what." What you described on what you do with the logins, I think is so great, and it's almost like we're like detectives, right? Like, "You give me your logins and let me just discover what's in there." It's so true because we're able to see, like, we can see the artifacts of things that have been either started or are working or not working. We see the error log, we see all the stuff. It's all there. That's the beauty of technology, right? Like it logs everything. For me, what's worked is to work with nonprofits in context of whatever system or whatever process that we're trying to improve or document. We do it in the moment. So many of my clients, I'll have like a long term relationship with them, and so I'll go a quarter or a year with them and just kind of shadow and I'm involved in different ways, but I won't try to improve anything the first go around. But then that gives me insight. So the next time it happens, I'll be like, hey, remember when we went through this last year? There was this XYZ. We're about to do it again. Let's document it. Let's fix it. We know all the gaps that existed already. Let's do it in context, in the moment. So you don't feel like you have to like carve out time to execute this. And so we'll intentionally pick key processes or key elements that we want to improve on each quarter and then tackle them in the moment. And that seems to be really effective because they don't feel like they're being pulled out of the work, which again is so important for mission driven people to like feel like I'm doing the work. I'm not dilly dallying over here. I'm doing the work. Yeah.
I love that. I love that we both kind of figured out our ways to get our hooks in, right? I think the moment when it stops being the theory, right? Because it's great to be listening to this podcast and thinking like,
Yep.
okay, yeah, Kronda and Noelia are telling me like there is a relief to my pain and blah blah blah. But then when you can get in there and get that one quick win, where they experience relief in some way, whether that's for me, that is usually a moment where I'm either have rooted around in your systems or maybe we're doing a live mapping session and I'm just drawing it out and saying, and then what happens? And then what happens? And then I share my screen and I say, is this what's happening? And you actually see it. And what's typically happened is there is this moment, it's like I should start to screenshot the look on people's faces where they're like, "Oh, I've been carrying all this in my head," or my team has been carrying all this in their heads, and it's sort of this simultaneous, like, "Whoa," and
Right.
relief because now it's visible, and that is the first step to being able to make it better. So, that I think then gets turns people into gets them into another gear of like, "Oh, oh, there might be something to this. Okay, let's pay attention, let's go
Yeah.
further.
Oh, yeah, it's so true. I love that moment too, and I feel like often then right after that, because it's almost like then you feel like you have the momentum and you're like, "Oh, this is making a difference." Like, now that people can see it all, now there's this awareness around it. I feel like at least for myself, the natural next step has always been like, "Okay, now I can actually train somebody else on it. Like, somebody can help me with this now." Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always saying you can't delegate chaos, and I think we've all talked to those people who just wanna, like, throw bodies at the problem, like, "Oh, we're overwhelmed, let's hire," and it's like, if you just keep doing that without ever addressing your systems, like, you're never gonna feel relief, and I've been there, and
Mhm.
I've had
Mhm.
clients who've been there, and yeah, so let's talk about the actual systems, like, I'd love to hear. I'm sure you have a process that you take people through, tell us all about it.
For me, what I think is really valuable is taking time to identify what those core things that you do are. So, oftentimes nonprofits are really clear on like the impact that they make in the community. Like, this is what we do. And then there's all the support that makes that happen. And so I often take people through that. Like, I'll say, okay, like let's just talk about first, this is the core impact that you create in the world. Now, let's identify what are the smaller pieces? How do you actually execute that? And basing it off of the purpose and the mission, it makes it easier because those are sort of the terms that they talk in. If I ask people about like what is a system that you do every day or once a quarter, like they're like, what do you mean? There's no systems here.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
So
always a system, even if it's an inefficient one or a bad one or it's not as effective as it could be, but like saying the S word isn't always the way
yeah.
to
Isn't the
go.
way to go. They don't wanna
Yeah.
talk about it. And I also sort of wanna share some empathy there, like, I get it. I think often nonprofit folks are doing the best they can, right? And they're often under-resourced, understaffed, and so the work that they're doing can be messy, right? Like, sometimes they are just, like, throwing something together at the last minute, but you know what? It's amazing. It did something amazing, and so the idea of documentation can be a little scary for them because they're like, well, people are going to see the way that I did this and it wasn't cool. Like I just threw it together. There is
Mhm.
no system here. I don't want to repeat that, right? Like why would I even want to document it? I'm not trying to repeat that. And so I just want to say again, like I get it, I understand, but there's a path forward on the other side of that once you start documenting it, right? And Kronda, I know you had some really good success with like some nonprofits that have sort of taken that leap of documenting things.
Yeah, and I think I wanna double click a little bit on, like, it's really, like, fear of judgment, right? It's, like, fear of, like,
Yeah,
"Oh, somebody's gonna
yeah.
see my mess," and I think everybody can relate to, like, I have things, there's lots of different systems in business, and I have parts of them where I'm not good at, and then it's, like, in order to get help, you gotta be willing to sort of lay it out there knowing that we're not here to judge what is, we're here to improve it so that, that it works for you and you can be proud of it. And yeah, I have had a couple of really great experiences working with nonprofits who have really had the vision to be reaching out and saying like, "Hey, this is what we're going to do. We have all of our data in like 14 different spreadsheets and we like we need someone who can bring this together." And so I had the first person to get my new sort of systems mapping based offer, which is called Backend Blueprint, was someone on Threads who was like, "Hey, I've got a 5-year-old nonprofit. And before we try to scale, I really want someone to come in and audit our systems and, map what's happening." And it was just really kismet. Like we didn't know each other, but I raised my hand and we had a great conversation. And so that was one of those experiences that was like, wow, if I could just clone you and just have every client be, as systems minded, as technically minded. Obviously that's not going to happen. And I'm here mostly to help. And who I've been helping is people who are a little bit overwhelmed maybe by the technical stuff. And I love helping those people too. But yeah, having someone who was just really internally motivated to do that, and then we went through the process, and then, we went through a 3-month retainer where we would meet weekly, and she'd say, "This is what I wanna improve," and I'd be like, "Okay, well, this is how I would approach that," and kind of get her like going in the right direction, and then she would be off to the races. Most people are not going to do that, which is why I'm so happy to have conversations with people like you who do the implementation and are willing to, dive in and do that work, because now I'm really happy being the architect saying, here's what's happening, here's how it could be. Let's get you resourced so that you can actually make that happen.
You're right, like, someone like that is unique, so forward thinking in this space. She probably comes from, like, outside of the nonprofit world because she's got, like, that business acumen already. What I find is that nonprofits don't necessarily invest in technology the way that we they, that the way that we think they do, right? Like, so a nonprofit will make an investment in fundraising support or in program support or operations, the administration. They don't tend to hire a technology director, for example. Like, there's very few technology director roles within nonprofits. But what happens is that that role of systems or business administration systems gets absorbed into one of the other core areas. So there's always a comms director, there's always a development director doing fundraising, and there's always an operations director. Underneath that, then the implementation of business systems, technology infrastructure happens. And so that's where I find that we're able to make the most impact is when we're integrated in. And there are those forward thinking nonprofits that think like, maybe we won't hire a technology director, but we'll make the investment in outsourcing that role to support then all those key areas because the systems and the tech live underneath those comms, fundraising, and ops for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think getting outside perspective is this is one of the places where that is really, really valuable, because, one of my clients years and years ago said you can't see the label when you're inside the jar, right? So not only do you not necessarily have the technical expertise internally to look at this, but just the perspective, someone coming in from the outside and sort of questioning your we've always done it this way, you know, and interrogating that. I would love to talk about just sort of the framework and the process of how I do that, because I've been
Yeah.
sort of like doing it instinctively, and only recently have I been like, oh, there is actually like a system and a framework behind this, and it's the clear framework. And so it starts with clarifying your processes. Obviously, my interest and my passion is about mapping and like making things visible. And so that's the
Mm.
first step. And what I really love about it is that as a technologist, I was very opinionated about software and tools, and I had things that I really loved, and I had things that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. And as an architect, I don't really care what the technology is. I'm literally just here to make visible whatever is happening and whatever tools and people and roles are involved with that, so that we can see it. So that's the first step, is just getting that clarity. And then the second thing is like liberating time, right? A lot of my clients come to
Mm.
me and they're very time poor. And so now that we have the map, we can really easily identify what are the high value, high ROI automations that are going to immediately free up your time or your team's time and give some a relief. So you can have that sense of like, oh, okay, yes, this was a good investment. We're seeing return on this. We want to keep going forward. And then the third thing is elevating the data. I would say most of my time is spent with clients, especially when I was still in a done for you role, with taking data that was just all different places, all different sources, all different spreadsheets, and bringing that together. And automation is really just managing data and moving data around. Right? So if you don't have a plan and a structure and a strategy for that, you might get a little bit of relief, but then it's going to fall apart again if you don't have that system. So we really figure out what is happening with your data, how do we centralize that so that you can get the data you need, so you can get the reporting that you need, all of those things. And then we can think about automating that data flow. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we've done this massive cleanup. How are we going to then put the gates on the front door to make sure that future data is coming in the structure that you need it? We're not using a drop down where we need a number for reporting on the back end. Like, those
Yeah.
are the things that I think about. So automating the data flow and making sure now new data coming in is going to be clean, it's going to be structured, it's going to go where it needs to go, even if that's multiple places. And then the last step is
Mm.
just repeating all of that. And that's really, I think,
Mhm.
where the long-term work is
Yeah.
people come to automation or AI or systems work thinking, I'm going to do a project and it's going to be done. And what you are doing is you're actually fundamentally changing the way you work so that people and software can work together. And that requires an identity shift and a habit shift that is a long term project. And so the repeat part is okay, now we have to change our culture to be we are a culture of an organization that documents our systems and we make that a habit and we prioritize it because we
Mhm.
see what the return is on the back end.
What a great framework you put together for folks. That's really great for them to be able to sort of see the steps that they go through, to be able to then like see it as a cycle that they go through and improve each and every single time. You and I sort of operate in a similar sense in that I don't have a specific framework that I take people through, but the way that I usually approach it is it again, trying to sort of take that context lens, and so I'll look at whatever system, whatever data piece that we're looking at from all the different angles that the organization functions in. So I usually start with like, what questions are you trying to answer right now in the organization
Mhm.
that you're not able to answer? Or are there decisions that you're trying to make that you're struggling to make? And usually I can identify a piece of data or a system that is blocking that decision, blocking that action, or blocking the answer to that question. And that then becomes the first thing that we address. And we look at it from the different angles of like, is this a program, like from the program's perspective, why is this data like this? From the fundraising perspective, oh, okay, so that's why we made it a drop down instead of a question, or a number. And then it's like, "Oh, relief. Okay, now I see. We're trying to answer 2 different questions with one piece of data, and it's not working." Yeah.
Oh man, I love that. Nothing makes me happier than talking to other systems techie minded people because it's just like, we're the melding of brains is just so fascinating and valuable to me. I did wanna say that you gave me the perfect intro to bring up a phrase that Brian and I are trying to make like, we're trying to make it a thing, and that is
Okay.
decision grade documentation. So the tool I
Mm.
haven't even talked about the tool, so go listen to my other podcast, but Puzzle is the process mapping tool that I use. It's the first tool that is actually made for business process mapping, and decision grade documentation is what it gives you because you're not just looking at a bunch of pretty boxes. You're actually able to, have space to put the notes associated with each individual step. You're actually able to attach specific roles or specific software tools to a step. You're able to actually create like data entity models of your all the information you're collecting and see that within the visual context. So, like that's its whole like I have 3 other podcast episodes just all about mapping and puzzle and that whole thing, and there's lots of stuff on my YouTube channel, but I think that's really what you're talking about is how do we have
Yeah.
decision grade
Mhm.
documentation so that you can
Mhm.
actually come to a place, a centralized place, look at what is there, and then make an informed decision that's gonna further your mission.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because there's been a lot of shifts in the nonprofit space over the last couple of years, I would say, because of the way that funding is changing. With the federal funding cuts that have happened, a lot of foundations and individual donors have had to sort of pick up their giving. And as a result of that, then the way that nonprofits are being looked at and evaluated on their impact has kind of shifted and changed, right? And so a lot of the decisions now on where money goes is based off of the data that a nonprofit can share about their impact. And so if we're not tracking that in the right way, it's really difficult to articulate the transformation that they're making in the world. And they could do it really well anecdotally. Storytelling is still really strong, but the data piece has always sort of, I feel like, lacked behind for nonprofits. And so we're really trying to help them make decisions and then also be able to demonstrate their impact with all of that sort of data and the systems that support it and become more appealing. Unfortunately, that's the way it is, to the funders that are going to be able to fund that great work that they want to do.
Ooh,
So
it's been a
good.
good one. It's been a good one. Um,
Yes.
okay, so for my listeners, tell people, I think, well, let me, before we do that, let me just say if you've been listening to this, you're, in a nonprofit, in a role, either a leadership role or an operations role, I hope that we've given you some hope, you
Yes.
know, to
Uh-huh.
know, like, if things feel chaotic now, it does not have to stay that way. I think that, really was my goal for this conversation. So with that, yeah, tell my listeners where to find you and all the places.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find
Mhm.
me on LinkedIn, Noelia Sanchez. My podcast is called Ops and Outcomes. We also have a newsletter that I encourage folks to sign up for. There, I share sort of deeper frameworks and deeper thoughts about how to do this work behind the scenes in a more sustainable way. That's my whole thing, right? Like, nonprofit work doesn't have to lead to burnout. It can be sustainable. We can do the mission driven work that we care and love about in a way that is also honoring sort of like our lives and the kind of life that we wanna have, so, yeah, definitely. Please reach out. For my folks, tell them where they can find you and learn more about the work that you're doing.
Yes. Well, now that I've updated my website, karveldigital.com, Karvel digital.com is the best gateway to find me in all the places. I do hang out on LinkedIn, probably is the most reliable place, in a social context, to hear my thoughts. I'm at the tail end of sort of this pivot. And so have been taking everything down to the studs, questioning everything, mapping my own stuff, figuring out like what do I want my new phase to be in terms of marketing. And so I'm really just landing on like what I want that to be. So it's gonna be definitely very based on long form content like this. So definitely check out my YouTube channel. And at some point I'll open up my brand new email newsletter and you'll be able to find that on my website as well.
Yes, excellent. Oh, well, love that we got to do
I
this
know.
together.
Yay. It's so good.
I can't wait for what's to come. There's probably gonna be something awesome and, additional coming out of this because this was too
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I'm sure this will not be the last team up for sure.
Yes. All right. Talk to you soon, Kronda.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for spending time with me today. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app and subscribe there. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a comment with your thoughts. Share it with a colleague who might be in a similar spot. And please consider leaving us a rating and review. That helps other nonprofit leaders find the show. Thanks again. See you next time.